Good evening. This is our fourth of seven Rotary District 5010 Community and Local Economy Building forums. Tonight will be on building the broadband infrastructure that will be crucial to Alaska's 21st century. And whenever we turn around and look, there's a bit more happening that, whether it's in Ketchikan or in Nome or wherever, such that it's certainly a dynamic and challenging area in Alaska. I'm Joe Cascio. I'm this year's district governor, and it's my delight and pleasure to introduce Professor Don Albrecht, one of our panelists. Don is the chair of the Western, Don, how would you phrase it? It's the chair of the Western Rural Development Consortium. You're muted, Don.
Okay, there we go. So I am director of the Western Rural Development Center. So my job is to assist rural areas, communities, and people in their economic development efforts.
And you're a professor at this time at Utah State University, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yeah. And then next we have Monica Babin. Monica is the senior associate leading the division for digital initiatives in the Washington State University Extension Division of Government Studies and Services. She works with businesses, government, community and economic development organizations on promotion, research, training, policy, and programs to increase broadband awareness, access, and use. Monica is active on numerous national, state, and local broadband groups. Much of her work on community work is in rural and tribal areas across Washington State, supporting local broadband action teams and other digital technology initiatives. Prior to joining Washington State University, Monica led a consulting firm focused on community and economic development for public, private, and nonprofit organizations. She was with a major telecommunications company in Washington State for 14 years, working on operations services, accounting, marketing, and public affairs. Welcome, Monica. Thank you for being with us tonight. And then Professor Paul Hill, our final panelist for this evening, is an extension professor for Utah State University, where he designs and leads economic development, educational programs in rural communities through the Rural Online Initiative that he founded in 2018. He's a past recipient of the Utah Governor's Medal for Science and Technology, as well as 23 other state and national awards for his innovative programs, impacts, research, and publications. Welcome, Professor Hill. And one of the things I will mention is that I should have mentioned as well, Professor Albrecht, you received 2 years ago in your consortium the Western Planner of the Year Award for the grassroots community economic development process you developed, which was very data-driven, as I recall. So certainly we're pleased to have you back with us as one of our nationally recognized experts. And I believe that you and Professor Hill and perhaps Ms. Babin worked on the Utah State Initiative, where the Utah government went and basically wired the whole state, which is, I understand, paying off handsomely for state economic growth and stability during COVID. So I believe that's correct. So thank you, everybody. And we'll go from there. I think we'll start with Professor Hill. Can you share your screen, and can you share your screen, or I can start it for you if need be? Thank you.
Screen shared. All right. How's everyone doing? I'm going to pull up the chat. And so if you, let's see here. I want to make sure.
I have it up. Yeah.
Do you have it up? Cool.
I do.
If you want to just, if anyone has questions or like to say something, please drop questions in the chat. That would be wonderful. So, but I'm excited to share with you a little bit about the Rural Online Initiative that we started here at in Utah through Utah State University. So in the chat, if you could share some of the things you like about where you live, living in a rural community. Most folks from some of our urban areas in Utah, they kind of question, why do you want to live in a rural community? And there's things about rural communities that are real advantages that are attracting people today, right now. And so please share what you like about where you live. Next, curious about some of the key employment challenges where you live. I watched a show recently. Let's see, I think it had to do, it was a like a mountain man show. My son's really into it. And it was these trappers in Alaska. And my son wants to be a professional trapper. And I was like, you have to live in, in Alaska to do that full time. And so looking at rural areas, a lot of these areas have been focused on extraction and these industries that have essentially been replacing labor with technology, and so there's some key challenges in these areas. Next, I'll so some of the topics I want to share with you as I go over is the rural urban remote work, and specifically what we're doing about it here at Utah State University across Utah's rural counties, and really the impact that we've made through our program, and then what we have coming up. And so in the rural urban divide, we look at our rural communities, and as you think of the community you're in and the rural communities in your areas, we're limited with our supply of well-paying jobs. In fact, in 2019, we did a needs assessment, and the top 3 things that our rural communities needed, residents of our rural communities expressed, was a need for well-paying jobs, steady jobs, and vocational training. We're dealing with negative net migration. Our young people are leaving. They don't see a future in these communities. In Utah, I just got a report today showing that we, over a 25%, a quarter of our population in our rural communities in Utah are under the age of 15. We've got a lot of young people in rural Utah, and another 8 to 10% are between the ages of 15 and 19. And so, unfortunately, we've over-relied on these shrinking extraction industries, and in times of plenty, we haven't diversified. We're dealing with high unemployment with technology, through technology and automation, and there's limited places to pursue higher education, physical places. We have distance education programs where you can get degrees and certificates online, but traditionally we haven't had. In Utah, we've have very limited resources as far as higher education, and our infrastructure, especially broadband, hasn't been the best. It's gotten better, and Utah has really doubled down and invested in fiber and broadband. And in fact, in some instances, we have in rural communities better connection speed and fiber right into Moab and Kanab. So we've also got high levels of intergenerational poverty. That's families receiving assistance generation after generation. And so if there was, if you're looking at the chat, if there's something that maybe that's unique in your challenges in your community, please drop that in the chat. And maybe you're experiencing all of these in your community. Maybe there's some that's not a problem in yours, and that's great. I pulled some numbers on this is from the last data from the last census, 2000 to 2010. We're looking at net migration in Anchorage, Juneau, and Kenai. Yeah, Kenai Peninsula.
Yep.
Yeah, and so if you look at these the dips right down here, Kenai, we're seeing negative net migration right about the time the young people leave high school. It's spiking. We have people in their 30s, moving to the area. Maybe they're moving back. Maybe you're getting new people, and then it kind of tapers off. Typically, as people age and they need to be closer to healthcare, they tend to leave the rural areas. but not always. The McKinsey Global Institute did a study, and this was 2019, and this was right before COVID. And what they did is they looked at, and this is where I'm coming to you from, right there in the bottom southwest corner of Utah, that 60% of our growth in the United States by 2030, or the next 10 years, is likely to be concentrated in the top these top 25 cities. So we looked at where's job growth, and we look at the jobs in the recession. We lost jobs, and then we regained these jobs over the last 10 years of economic growth. But the jobs lost in rural didn't come back. All the job creation was happening in these urban centers, and that's at the time in 2019 that was projected to continue to grow. And then we start looking at automation, and it's really dividing these areas. We look at these high growth hubs where all the jobs are being created, and that's leaving what's described as like distressed America in the dust. Not only our populations are declining, there's no job creation. It's going for us is rural place to raise a family. If we can bring those connection speeds, which Monica will talk about, there's so much growth and prosperity that can come from that, and we can really level things off. I like to say that while talent is evenly distributed, opportunity isn't. We have amazing, talented people in rural areas, and people that want to move to rural areas, especially Alaska, that what they really need is broadband. So that's a tremendous opportunity. What we saw was with the pandemic, leading up to that, there's this rise of remote work. With the pandemic, I spent a lot of time trying to convince business leaders and organizations, hey, you should try this out. Try out this this thing called remote work. And it wasn't adopted too well in Utah. A lot of the adoption of remote work has happened in major urban centers, New York and Chicago and California. And typically people work remote and live nearby. But with the pandemic, so many people started leaving some of our urban areas, and a lot of our tech companies. I mean, we just see day by day, if you're on Twitter and you follow the concept of remote work and tech organizations, they're saying, you know what, we're not coming back to the office until next year. And then it's like, oh, you know what, you can work remote indefinitely. And in Utah, many of our companies are saying, you know what, we're not going to renew our lease. In fact, work wherever you want. We've seen productivity increases. Gartner study of CFOs looked at productivity and costs being way down, and it's like they're questioning the need for the real estate. And then we started seeing people. We had this like idea of like negative net migration. Then all of a sudden, people are stacked on top of each other in New York, and it's been awful to see what they've gone through in Seattle as well. But through the pandemic, people are leaving the cities. They want fresh air. I mean, just in my town alone, we had 70 families move to our town, and that's so their kids from Las Vegas and California, mainly because in Utah we're going to school right now. Our kids are masked up, they're wearing visors, they're doing all that, wearing all their PPE, but they want their kids to have the high school experience, and so they've left. Remote work has allowed them to come to rural Utah. We're seeing home prices rise in our rural communities where that's really never happened for a very long time. And so we're seeing this migration that we weren't expecting, and where the numbers where McKinsey wasn't projecting in 2019. So things have changed, and one thing in 2017, our governor he's looking for solutions. We had a lot of prosperity in Utah, and he realized that the prosperity hasn't been evenly distributed, and we needed to find some bottom up ways, some ideas coming from rural Utah. And that's what our lieutenant governor suggested, again, bottom up approach to letting the counties and rural areas figure out what's a solution that would work there. And so one of the ideas that came up was this idea of, well, what if we didn't have to, recruit businesses and bring the jobs? What if we could train our people to come to learn how to work remotely and bring the jobs there without having to leave their homes? And so doing a quick lit review of the growth of remote work, we've seen that the majority of jobs created in the mid 2000s were in this alternative work category outside of this 9-to-5 employment. And in fact, 35% of the US workforce were freelancing online. So that's short-term jobs. And then a more recent study found that almost 40% of jobs, if you're spending 60% of your time during the day in front of a computer, you can work remotely. You can do your job without having to go into the office. And there's estimates at Global Workplace Analytics looking at the workforce really transitioning to working from home, and that being the case, we did a study in Utah. To the office, how is remote work going? Trying to get a feel, and that was our air quality office, and they found that air quality improved. Environmentally, this was a great thing, and people like working remotely. They wanted to get back to the office, but they wanted a hybrid. They wanted to keep remote work as an option. And so, some of the benefits of remote work, I won't spend too much time on it, but the fact that you don't have a building to take care of, and a commute, there's some really good cost savings there. And there's this work-life balance that people enjoy. They're getting their time back. They're able to spend more time with their family. And you're able to access talent. Not all the best talent in the world lives in the same zip code. And so you're able, as an organization, be able to attract talent and retain talent. Remote work started in the 70s. It was incubated in the federal government and really perfected in the private sector. And a lot of organizations started remote work because they didn't want to lose talent. They said, I'm leaving, my spouse has got a job, I got a new opportunity, I need to be close to my family and take care of my aging in-laws. And it was like, wait, we can figure out a way to keep you, you're too valuable. And then next thing you know, they're completely remote. So in 2018, our legislature, this idea of a remote work education program came up, and our legislature was all on board. It was some years of prosperity, and they invested in remote work as an economic development strategy. And this bill passed unanimously in the House and the Senate. And we realized when we started this Rural Online Initiative program, we thought we would just connect people in rural communities with remote work. But what we ended up doing is we realized that we were giving people hope. They heard about this idea. They didn't know where to get started. They didn't know how to make this happen for them with the skills they already had, or what skills they needed to learn in order to make this a possibility so they can stay in their rural communities and not have to move to where they can not even really afford a house. And so we realized very quickly that we were there empowering and showing these families the opportunity that it was possible. So this was a 3-year pilot program, and we quickly launched a professional course that was meant to influence the demand for remote jobs. People didn't realize that that this was a possibility, so they weren't looking for it. And we realized that when we were placing people, probably about the 30th remote job placement, we realized that 99% of them were outside of Utah. We weren't connecting the dots. We weren't connecting rural Utahns to the talent in rural Utah to the need for talent in our urban areas. And so there was this gap. And so we created a leadership course to influence the supply of remote work jobs, to really convince leaders. And this was, again, February 2020. We all know what happened shortly the next month. And we spent a lot of time convincing leaders that, hey, this is a good idea. And then they were really forced to adopt remote work. And then we started a 4-H remote work training program to help youth see that the future was bright in their rural communities, and then they could work for NASA, they could work for Google, Facebook, start their own business or their own Etsy shop, eBay store, selling Amazon products. they could do business online and live wherever they wanted and not have to leave their rural area. So we have program coordinators that train people. They're out in our rural communities and they're training. They're doing remote work town halls to introduce people. People go through and take our course, and they can also they receive a certificate, but they can also receive scholarships to help improve. Sometimes they're not ready if they've worked at Tractor Supply or Home Depot for a number of years, and they've always had a supervisor and they've worked on site. They're going to need some skills, and they're going to need to skill up, and so we help them with that. And so people inside outside of Utah can participate in the course, but we have our courses up on our website where you can apply. We don't accept everyone, unfortunately, because you have to have reliable internet, your own computer, and it is experience as a knowledge worker or strong desire to be a knowledge worker. And then our course, we have it's meant, the whole experience is experiential. It's meant to mimic being on a remote team. And so you're doing asynchronous work, working through modules in preparation for weekly meetings over the course of a month. And so our course is held in, materials are held in Canvas, just like a regular course. They're doing the work, and the work, what they're doing is they're focusing on how to communicate, how to plan your day and to be productive, compliance, security, safety issues as a remote worker, and really how to be a critical thinker. You don't have a boss that's watching you, telling you exactly what to do every moment of the day. So they're learning about how to be the best practices of remote work, as well as how to find and search for a remote job. And so we use Zoom meetings. That's kind of what our classes typically look like. We regularly have workshops over 50, 100, 150 people. And then there's a back channel where peer-to-peer learning takes place, where they're communicating over Slack. Maybe you have seen Slack or you've used Slack, but we organize it so that our peers can learn together and to share ideas, share wins, share success stories, and share where there's job opportunities. They receive a certificate, and many people have said that the certificate has helped them stand out. Employers really appreciate when they're hiring remote workers that you've taken time and dedicated time to learning your craft, learning your skill. And so the way the experience looks like is they apply, they're placed in a cohort for a month, and they go through the training, they focus on their skills, and then we coach them with our program coordinators into job placement. So since 2018, we've awarded over 1,000 certificates there, and this isn't easy stuff here. They're doing 30 hours of training across the entire month, working on 9 projects, attending workshops. They're again mimicking that experience of being on a remote team. They're learning by doing. It's my background is in 4-H, and so they're learning by doing, just as we do. And I know in Alaska, when I see pictures, you guys have like reindeer livestock shows where we're out showing steers and stuff. But they're learning by doing. That's the best way to go about this. We have over an 80% completion rate. It's really hard. A lot of people have applied, but because of various challenges, barriers, they're not able to participate. And we try to connect them with the resources from the state so that they can get assistance. We just had 100 laptops from a tech company donated to us. So we're able to as people start seeing what we're doing, they're giving us resources. They're giving us MiFi hotspots so that people in rural Utah can participate. And that's just another little picture of just like a single workshop class. So what do these people do? Brian, he lives in Carbon County. This is coal country. And he took his customer service skills that he had in the private sector, working face-to-face with people. And he's a customer service manager for an online company called HubStaff. That's a staffing agency. And Althea, she was a legal secretary, a paralegal. And she was able to find a remote job working for the federal government and the Veterans Benefits Administration. And Carrie's an accountant. We've placed a lot of accountants. You can be an accountant, a bookkeeper from anywhere. And now she focuses on online companies. And so majority of our participants are female. They're over the age of 40. What's awesome about the fact that almost 70% of our participants don't have any remote work experience whatsoever. Shows how innovative they are, shows how hungry they are, and they really want to learn, and they really want to stay in their rural communities. They realize that this is the future, that remote work is the future of work, and they resided in their county for a number of years and didn't have any plans on leaving. And in addition, they saw that in their local area, they realized that there weren't adequate wages, and their goals for their career. They realized that, I'm not going to be able to attain those goals by staying here without pursuing remote work. And again, the majority, 62%, didn't have any plans to leave their area. They're raising their kids. They love the area, and they're trying to just make a better life for their family. And so just going over knowledge, we measure pre and post tests, and to see for each module, to see if how their knowledge gained. And so as you can see, these p-values here, 0.001, we've seen statistically significant gains in all the modules that they're taught. Their attitudes towards remote work changed. They felt favorable towards seeking remote work employment opportunities. And what's really great is that their aspirations for the future, they felt empowered. The course helped them to become a better remote worker. They felt empowered to seek remote work. And the biggest one is that they felt they intended to seek remote work after the course. And so in Utah, we realized that we got to compare apples to apples. And so you look at jobs created in urban counties and the economic impact of one job in an urban county, and then the economic impact of a rural county based on population. One job created in an urban county, let's see right here in Wayne County, that's equivalent to 211 jobs to have the same economic impact in a urban county. And then you look at Paiute County, 740, that's where Don's from, is Wayne County. But I'm down here in Washington, so 5. But that's the economic impact. And so when we look at, in order to compare apples to apples, we placed, I need to update that, 149 jobs. That's actually equivalent to over 5,000 jobs in our state. And so we put a lot of resources into bringing, a big company that's going to bring in a lot of jobs, but we have to win these. It's hand-to-hand combat in our rural communities. And so we fight for each job, and it's made a huge difference. That's 100 and almost 50 families that are able to stay in rural Utah because of that. So overall, I think I've basically out of time, but those who found remote work were satisfied. They made more money. It was a better situation for their families and for the environment as well. And so, yeah, now I'm happy to take any questions, or I don't know if you want to hold those to the end.
There is a question regarding the cost of the course, either
sure.
Individual or sponsored by the state government, as I think you mentioned.
Yeah, so in Utah, the course is $20 for all residents in rural communities. In urban communities, it's $99. We had a lot of people outside of the state of Utah who wanted to take the course, and so we went back to our legislature and said, hey, what we found is that people outside of Utah in different time zones, it actually enhances the experience. We want to prepare our people in rural communities to the diversity, to the challenge of working with people across state lines. And so they were like, great. They set the price of $199, and so anyone outside of the state of Utah pays $199, and they get this experience, this certification from Utah State University, and then ultimately it enhances the experience for Utah residents as well as anyone from for instance Alaska or we've had someone from the United Arab Emirates. So I guess we're an international program as well as Canada. So yeah, you can certainly partake.
Oh, I'm sorry. Another question. Does the state of Utah have a broadband policy to service rural areas?
Yeah, so Utah has we're definitely living in the shade of those who went before us. And when we had the ability, we put in great broadband infrastructure, and so we're using that. We've got fiber lines. The state is further investing in getting fiber to our rural communities. It was a real going through the pandemic was a wake-up call that we were glad we had the infrastructure in place, but we realized that we left out San Juan County, which is on the opposite southeastern corner of the state, where we had the Navajo tribe there. They had a terrible outbreak of COVID-19 there, and because of that, I mean, major quarantine. Didn't have the internet for those students to do their work at home, and so that was a wake-up call. The state just went into emergency legislative sessions and dedicated allocated funds to invest in that. So it's coming along, but again, we're limited. We have limited capacity. We only have like a handful of companies doing fiber optic lines and broadband, and it's good, but it could be better. At least we're not Mississippi. At least we're not Louisiana. But it could be worse. But we definitely have room to move forward and grow.
Okay, we're going to move now to Ms. Babin. Did I pronounce the name improperly? Monica?
Babine, but that's
Babine.
close. And I married it, so I'm learning still too.
I know.
After all these years.
People ask me about, did they pronounce my name correctly? I say, I don't even care, because it's all over the place. It's not even the real family name. It was Ellis Island. Here we'll give you an American sounding name. So I don't care. It's not even the real name. But I'm sorry if I did. We have now Ms. Monica Babine, and we'll save some time for questions toward the end. And if possible, I'd like to talk about the Moab situation a little bit too, and how that came along. I think Professor Albrecht had a lot to do there with its economic explosion in even despite it's been a small area. And so maybe we could talk about that a bit afterwards, Don, if we have time. So Monica, you are a co-host. Let's share your screen and we'll go. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's see if we got this yet. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, you could go to slideshow.
Yeah, I'm trying to get there. Hold on a second here.
Okay.
Let me just. And I just want to say, when Dawn came to me and said, hey, Monica, do you want to do a presentation for the Alaskan Rotarians? I said, awesome. I've only in my life been to Alaska once, and I can't wait to go. And then he said, well, it's going to be via Zoom. And I said, well, what are we talking about? And he said, we're talking about broadband. And I said, well, that's appropriate then. So so I appreciate the opportunity to be with you virtually today. And what I want to say is, like Paul said, if you want to support a remote work program or remote work in your communities, you need broadband. And so what I'm going to talk about a little bit today is a little bit this evening is just a little bit of the basics of broadband. And then I want to get into some of the ways that in Washington State, communities are getting involved in how to prepare to be able to have programs like what Paul has offered. And by the way, I'm a student in his class this month at Washington State University, and in the state of Washington, we are looking at using this program statewide, and we're currently involved in an evaluation with his team to determine if and how we'll move forward. So I'm delighted to be here because, he's my professor right now. How's that? So let's get into this a little bit. So let's see if we can get slides to advance. Whoa. So so I want to just do a little basics of broadband. Then I really want to get into how we in Washington State are really working on this. And it really is all about partnerships. And I think that'll come through loud and clear to you all. I want to first of all thank one of my partners, the U.S. Department of Commerce National Telecommunications Information Agency, their Broadband USA group. It's a lot of words to say, hey, these people do broadband for the U.S. government. NTIA is a tremendous resource if you're looking at broadband and want to know if and how to move forward in communities with broadband. And so I'm going to share a few of their slides because I think they give some good background, and then we'll dive into the Washington State story. So, what's broadband? Well, it's high-speed internet, of course, and it comes in lots of forms. And you hear people talk about fiber optics and wireless and DSL and coax cable. And gosh, in Washington this last week, Starlink, SpaceX, Starlink announced a partnership with our Hoh tribe, a very, very small remote tribe on the Olympic coast of Washington, to provide them with broadband services. So it takes a lot of different forms, as I'm sure you've seen in Alaska. When we talk about what is broadband, the definition that's currently being used by the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and many of our agencies is this idea of 25 up and 3 down. So that's broadband. And so, why does it matter? Broadband matters because it's what ties our communities together, and it also matters because it connects us to the world. And it really doesn't matter where we are anymore. Broadband is really what helps our community members and our institutions, our organizations thrive. And it's important for education. It's important for telehealth. It's important for our businesses, big and small. It's important for public safety. Government, we can't take advantage or participate in government services without broadband. And in our communities, it's critical because our residents need it for all of those things that are listed there and just staying connected with family and friends. So when you have a connected community, you have an opportunity to really participate in a lot of applications, including remote work, as Paul has been talking about, and the education needed for remote work. And here's some of the ways that a community obviously can take advantage of being connected. So what are we doing in Washington? WSU, Washington State University, in partnership with our state broadband office through our State Department of Commerce and many other entities in our state, have been doing some work to increase broadband awareness, access, and use. And our whole approach, the whole premise for how we do work, is that broadband is local. And here's kind of the flow that our state broadband office is following right now to increase broadband access and use. And how we're doing that at the local level is through a model that Washington State University Extension developed called our Broadband Action Team. And this is really a way to engage the community in broadband planning, decision makers and community members. And we work on a variety of areas related to broadband. And here's a picture of one of our groups hard at work on increasing broadband. So our broadband action teams, or BATS as we call them, why do we form them? Well, what we have found is that it is important to form them because really no one knows better than our local communities what their broadband needs are, where their broadband assets are, and what they'd like to use it for, and they're not able to use it for now. We bring these teams together so ISPs are not the only ones making decisions about where broadband is deployed in our areas. And these teams meet with those internet service providers to be able to help them identify where best to make investments and move forward. Broadband is really for everyone. It touches everyone. And so our teams are very diverse. Our broadband action team model is replicable, but it's also customizable, and communities pick and choose and work together to make sure that the right folks come to the table to work on broadband. But here's, just kind of a list of the typical entities that often participate in our broadband action teams. And you can see it's very, very diverse. So we work on a lot of activities locally. and I've listed a few of the projects that we've been working on at the local level. To help build awareness, we have technology fairs. One of my friends calls this the geek version of a garden, your home and garden show. And it's great because you can bring together anybody who touches the internet, ISPs and Radio Shack, anyone who's working on libraries, and folks come together and they learn about what resources are available for broadband and then how to use broadband. We work on access. We do community and business surveys. Through COVID, we have helped secure mobile hotspots for students. They just work on projects that help meet the local broadband needs in their communities. And then we help with, you know, we don't want to have broadband deployed and it be a field of dreams that no one comes to. So our broadband action teams also help with teaching people how to use it so we can make sure that we're taking full advantage of it. And a couple of projects that I listed there are our digital day camps, which are peer-to-peer business learning about social media, how to set up a website, those kinds of things. And then we've been in a national partnership with Microsoft and 4-H, where our 4-H teens have been teaching digital skills in their communities. Our broadband action teams don't only work locally, they help support our state activities. As part of COVID, WSU started looking at what can we do? Our students are going to be home. We don't have, they're not going to, in some cases, have access. Many of our students come from rural communities. And so we had this idea to turn our internet inside out in our extension offices and offer what we were calling drive-in Wi-Fi hotspots in parking lots. And we worked with our state broadband office, with our Washington State libraries, and with about a dozen partners, public, private, and nonprofit, including our K-12 schools across the state. And we have stood up over 600 drive-in Wi-Fi hotspot parking lots for folks to come and take advantage of internet so they can take care of their school, healthcare, and business needs. It's going to snow tomorrow in Eastern Washington. So we've started turning our attention on our drive-in Wi-Fi hotspots back inside and working on COVID compliant inside free public Wi-Fi access. So stay tuned. We'll have more about that soon, I hope. And our broadband action teams help spread the word about that and help identify locations and the need for locations. We also in the state, our state broadband office has stood up a broadband map that has a speed test on it. We are going through this process now in the state of spreading the word to get folks to go take the speed test. The idea here is if we really want to make a difference in securing the broadband that we need and target it to the areas where it's needed, we really need to have good data. We can't just say it, you know, our data, our broadband is bad in this area. So this speed test and mapping project is helping us to be able to identify and target specific areas where we then, through our broadband action teams, can start pulling together project ideas and then working to go and secure state and federal funding to do broadband build outs to meet those needs. By the way, red is not good broadband and black means none at all. And the way we gathered that was by having point people in our broadband action teams who were willing to take calls or emails from folks to say, hey, I don't have broadband at my home. Can you put me on the map? Here's my address. Our broadband action teams, our BATs, also participate in policy discussions, and these are just a few pictures of some of the meetings that we have had with federal and state folks, decision makers about broadband, to help them understand really what's going on in our rural communities, what the need is, and help them start to think about how to make policy decisions that really meet the needs of those that are actually at that end of that broadband line. So let's say you wanted to work on something like this in your community. This is kind of the process we go through with our broadband action teams. We ask them to, define what their community and priorities are, and their goals. We ask them to help assess the assets and what the gaps are, and that's where those surveys, and we have town halls and a variety of ways that we gather this information. We're seeking this input from the residents and the businesses, and then they meet regularly to discuss and make plans to tackle these, and they really are focused on being very action oriented. And that's the critical piece of this, because it's easy to get a whole group of people together in an area that does not have sufficient broadband and have it be just a broadband complaint session. But our focus is really on what actions do we want to take. And so we move through the first part to really get to those action steps. And that is, how we've been working through this in our communities. We're at the point right now in our state where our state Department of Commerce, where our broadband office is put in a request in their decision package to the legislature to help fund a broadband coordinator, a BAT coordinator in every county, and also to have at the state broadband office some technical assistance to help work with these teams. That's the approach we're taking. Again, it's all about partnerships. And we're excited about what comes next, because we want to be able to offer Paul's class anywhere in Washington that folks want to use it. Thanks so much for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Are there any questions for Ms. Babine?
Yes, I have a question. So I'm interested. I'm at a middle school, and our kids are distance learning right now, but our district keeps telling us that they are trying to work with our local internet provider and getting modem boxes into the homes.
Right.
How is that similar or different from these mobile hotspots? And is one better than the other? And they keep saying, oh, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. This has been since last spring. And it's like, okay, we have a problem with firewalls. We have to order firewalls. So maybe you can help me get some clarity on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So the project where you saw the map where we had the over 600 drive-in Wi-Fi hotspots, those were actual, you drive up, you sit in your car in the parking lot, or you sit on a bench there, and you take advantage of the internet that is offered in a building, a school, a library, an extension office, those kinds of, a port office. Someplace where an organization was comfortable with having people there using their internet. We also have been working on the mobile Wi-Fi hotspots, the telephone mobile carrier hotspots. And we have worked through our state Office of Public Instruction and with state government to help distribute those those mobile Wi-Fi hotspots to our students. We're still in the process. In fact, our state was in a meeting today. We have an internet access crisis team called IACT, and we meet weekly, and it's a very diverse group from across the state that is looking at all of our internet needs. And so this afternoon, we heard from our Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and our governor's office, who are both putting in requests this year to our legislature to get more of those mobile Wi-Fi hotspots, because that allows students, if they have cell service at their home, if they've got the reach there, it allows them to stay in their home and use that. So is it Tracy that asked the question?
Yes.
Yeah, so Tracy, part of it depends on what's available in your area. Is there a good cellular network in the area? If there is, the mobile Wi-Fi hotspots work, because then you can have that actually in your home, or you can take it wherever you are and use it if there's cellular service. If there isn't cellular service, then we have to look at these other options. So we're finding we are technology neutral, vendor neutral, politically neutral, boundary neutral. We just try to find the best match for the community.
So, yeah, and we do have here in Barrel, pretty good. I mean, it's slow at times, but we have, a couple of providers actually. What would be the holdup of getting this done? Because I don't know the right questions to ask, but it seems like, this has been going on since last spring. Um, what are just some good questions to ask to understand where they are in the process?
Right. So some of what we have found is in Washington State, our school districts are all local control. So we have a state office of superintendent of public instruction, but they make recommendations, they help provide resources, but it really comes down to the local school district and sometimes even the local building on making the decision. In some cases with schools, especially because we're talking about minors, schools are really concerned about having people have access outside of the building into their networks. And so some of what may be going on, Tracy, is there may be concerns from the IT professionals at the school around security and how do we make sure that we filter so students are not using the internet for things other than school and those kinds of things. So that may be part of it. It could be a technology issue. COVID has created a huge stress on the supply chain for some of these devices in some cases. So those are some of the kinds of things that I would want to know. I would want to know, is this a supply chain issue? You're not able to get a hold of the equipment? Is this an issue about the school being concerned about how to connect to their network? Is this an issue about not having available appropriate carriers to meet the students' needs? And there's we could probably come up with a long list of other questions if you want to connect offline and we could follow up. I'd be happy to.
When they say they have to order a firewall, what does that mean?
Well, yeah, so Paul probably could dive in on this too, because these are some of the things that that gets taught in his class. But lots of times there are it's a security measure, and so they probably are working to set up the kinds of security that make sure that students are just using the internet for what it needs, and that there doesn't compromise the network. Paul, you want to add to that?
And can I add before you answer? So if you're going to order a firewall, how long does that usually take?
It depends.
Months, weeks, years?
I think it depends, Tracy, upon how on top of things people are. I put in an actively filtering security appliance type firewall, which is more active than a mere firewall at my office. And I just bought the thing online, bought the Cisco advanced security license, and I had the thing up and running in a couple of days. It's not really all that hard to do. It just plugs in between the phone line and your network or your hotspot. It's not that hard to get an advanced firewall set up or even get it there. But it depends on your people, I think, and their processes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not like it's something that you're never going to find until you go sifting through some secret basement vault in Cupertino or something like that.
Right.
Well, that's kind of the way it's being couched, and this is after months and months and months.
Maybe they don't know what they need to do, or maybe they don't have the money right now.
And no, that's not the issue. We don't.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't think so in the North Slope Borough.
Thank you. These are really good questions that I can follow through with. Thank you.
Great.
We still have a little bit of time. Would our panelists like to talk about the Moab, Utah situation and how that's changed in terms of its rural economic development into a small tech hub through your broadband initiatives in Utah. You've got to unmute yourself, Dawn.
Okay. Paula, is the ROI in Moab?
Yes. Yep. We're out there. Yeah, they're trying to attract tech talent. We're doing the same thing in Washington County. If you look over out on this side of my house, she works for Microsoft and he works for Amazon. And we don't have Amazon or Microsoft offices in Washington County, but we're attracting some of the greatest talent in the world because we have a great community. It's a good place to raise a family, and so they're finding it, and they're moving here where I live. It used to be, it was always in the top 10 list. St. George, Utah was the top place to retire if you were old, if you wanted to get out of the snow. And a few years ago, we weren't even on the top 25 list for places to retire, and we considered that a win. And the average age got down to about like 33, 34 of residents. And so it used to be that people would come to our community to retire, and then they would spend some, they'd spend money here, they'd buy a house. But now we're attracting remote workers in their late 20s, early 30s, and they're raising their families here. They're spending more here. They're buying bigger houses. They're highly educated. They're volunteering in our community, and so we don't have to bring the infrastructure, the big, huge tech buildings. We do get some of that, but we can bring the talent here. And in a lot of ways, Utah, what we're also doing is we are incentivizing companies in urban counties, tech companies, to hire remote workers in our rural communities, and we give them $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 if they pay 110% of that county's average wage, which in some instances is 40, 50,000. And I think in one county it was like 24, 27,000. And so if you hire talent, they'll get a kickback, and tech companies, any company is taking advantage of that. And what we're also doing is building out co-working spaces. So you might have heard of Kiln, or what's the big one? It's like, I'm drawing a blank, but these, essentially it's like an office, but anyone can work in there. And anyway, we're building these in our rural communities because our people that go through my program are losing out on jobs, not because they don't have the talent or the education or the work ethic. It's because they get to that final interview and they do a speed test, and they don't have in some parts of the state, they don't have enough speed, and then they say, well, sorry, well, we'll have to hire somebody else. And so by providing by connecting fiber and the last mile of fiber into that community, and building out a co-working space where they have a professional space to conduct business, to go and have meetings, and where it's secure and they can have 24/7 access, they're able to get that job and all the benefits that come with it. So we're still working on our broadband. We're way ahead in some states, but in some areas we're definitely, we have room to grow. So co-working spaces are critical, as well as that incentive program, and then we kind of fill in that third leg of the stool with the education to help people in rural connect to remote work.
I seem to recall, Professor Albrecht, you sent me an article from PC Magazine several weeks ago about the Central Kenai Peninsula here in Alaska being named one of the top 15 places for remote outdoor-oriented workers, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, their local phone company has a PPPoE Ethernet up to 500 megabits into offices here. Well, GCI does.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Joe, back to your, Moab, Utah is a place like many others. They were very effective in developing their amenities and having a tourism industry, but they were struggling because the tourism industry provides a lot of seasonal and low pay kinds of jobs. And I think what Paul's doing is gives the community with a lot of amenities, a place that people would like to live, an opportunity of attracting better jobs that pay more than cleaning a hotel or flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. And they aren't seasonal, it can be year-round kind of stuff. And so it is a huge benefit to some of these amenity-based communities. It just provides what they really need.
So I think what I hear people saying is for rural communities that would be a good place to live, but for difficulties with good employment, broadband and perhaps congregate workspaces with high-speed access are really the key missing element there, along with training for people in how to be the appropriate remote worker, if you will, in our modern gig economy.
Yep.
Do we have any more questions there? We have one. Did you see that, Monica? From Ron Inouye. How do you establish the county communities?
Yeah, so I responded in the chat. So to establish a broadband action team, typically what happens is we've been promoting this model, and then we'll hear from one or more local leaders in a community that say, we really have a need for increasing broadband access, or we really have a need for increasing broadband access use. And then what we have done in the state of Washington, and we'll keep you posted as we move forward with this, but our partnership with the state broadband office is been terrific, because what we're doing is we're standing up a website that's going to have all these resources out on there that we have used to help train communities and support communities with their broadband action teams. So we have worksheets to help them figure out, okay, who should we have on the team? So there's a stakeholder worksheet that helps you kind of walk through and figure out, who do you want to invite in your community, to participate in the team, and then help them develop their meeting agendas, help them with their business and community broadband surveys, help them do inventories of their community anchor institutions, libraries and hospitals and public buildings, to determine what broadband they have. So we have all these resources that will be out on this website. And it's going to be open access. Anybody, any state will be able to use it. And so then that's what we want to have these, some technical assistance available through our state broadband office, through a WSU extension. And then if we can get someone, some funding through the legislature to actually hire someone locally to help coordinate that effort, make sure it's a part of their job. We think that's really a key. If you could have a BAT coordinator helping support a team, someone who this is their job, and it can be part-time, obviously, then what happens is you start to, you have someone who's dedicated to this, and make sure it keeps moving forward, and you bring the group together regularly to work and focus on these projects. But it also increases local capacity and knowledge about broadband. It's not some outside consultant coming in and telling you what to do or how to do it, or what somebody else should do for you. It really is this local group working to learn what broadband is and what they need and want to use it for, and then take those actions in partnership with internet service providers and local, state, and federal government funding streams.
I happen to work with libraries and with the nonprofit world.
Yep.
And we, just because of those two, I'm aware of broadband issues, but getting someone at the state level at the governor's office to even understand that it spreads across commerce and all the other fields is a very difficult thing to do. And so they're not willing right now to even think about that at a state level. So we've been talking to local legislators, trying to get this kicked up. But it's very difficult when people don't see the interrelationships and they're waiting for that next piece of technology, like the new string of satellites that's just going
Right.
to, service everyone real quick, and it's going to be cheap and they don't have to spend their money.
Yeah.
But it's a very difficult kind of thing to anticipate what that next level will be when we're needing those services right now through
Right.
education and health and public safety.
Ronald, that's why we have found this mapping project that we're doing to be so powerful, because it makes it so clear. And the backside of that map that you don't see is all the layers that our broadband offices put on there that show this is the legislative districts.
Yes.
This is the free and reduced lunch. This is, where we have anchor institutions that are lacking broadband service, or where we have broadband service. So we're building all these layers behind it that help tell that story. But that map has been so powerful in helping our legislators. The other thing I'll just say to you, and maybe this isn't happening in Alaska, but in January, I was still trying to sell telework and the need for broadband, and I ain't selling no more. COVID has made the lack of broadband both a global issue and a very personal issue. And almost everyone I talk to has a story about themselves or someone they know that can't get access to healthcare right now, can't get access to government service, can't get access to education, can't do their job. And if there is a silver lining in COVID from the broadband world standpoint, it has been that it has helped people see what a critical infrastructure it is. Is that not happening in Alaska?
Well,
Well,
I think by default, the Denali Commission, which is coordinated with all of the federal money coming into the state, has sort of taken that on by default. And they've done a very good job. They have very little access to people who aren't part of the commission. And so they're going to have to sell this idea to get more people to buy in. But as you say, COVID has really changed the story dramatically.
well, just to give an example, and I'll be brief. My wife is a psychologist who does evaluations. Last year, she flew up into Alaska native smaller villages out of Kotzebue, Unalakleet, Nome, and was doing evaluations, flying in small aircraft, periodically getting weathered in out in the middle of the Bering Sea. And this year, with the rapid work on developing acceptable remote test administration software, she's able to do it all from Soldotna, from home. And it's worked out very well for her. In my case, as an attorney, I've done almost strictly. I deal primarily with adjusters rather than attorneys in the courts. We tend to go and get things done. I've worked essentially remotely with adjusters I've never seen physically for about 15 years. This just isn't much of a change.
This has been a very interesting discussion, but how do you see these concepts requiring high band internet and all of that kind of stuff? How do you see this applying to villages that have less than 500 people living there and little or no education? Because we have 300 rural school districts, with most of them run by people that don't know anything about education. And yet we're talking about having people apply for jobs in villages like that. They don't even have teachers out there. So, I mean, it's kind of geologically and, in terms of the villages and that kind of stuff, and with no streets or rural connections, a little bit different than what you have in Utah, a little bit different than what we experience in Washington State when I lived there.
This is Ron. I'd like to take that on. I helped a University of Alaska student who comes from the village of Kungiganak out in Western Alaska. I was really concerned about him because in his small village, the only place that they can get any access is at the library at the school or the city hall. So I told him, if you're going to have to buy GCI, you're going to be paying a fortune. And he agreed. He went back to Kungiganak The school was closed and the city hall was closed. He had to pay mega bucks to finish up his coursework. And it just made me angry that this kid who was doing his best was getting the short end of the stick. And I think that's totally unfair. And even if they are small villages, they're going to regional schools. They need that education. They need that telehealth care. They need public safety. And we're not providing it to them. That is really very unfair. I know that the private companies are trying to provide services, and I think they do as much as they can. But there are lots of places that will never have enough population to warrant a commercial service. And that's the dilemma for us. Thanks.
Yep, I totally agree with what Ron said.
Yeah, you know, we have 29 federally recognized tribes in the state of Washington, and many of them also have, that's probably doesn't cover the geography and the doesn't compare necessarily to the Alaskan tribal community, but that is a huge focus area for us because of what you both just talked about, which is there is no pure private sector play for broadband in those communities. There is no business case for broadband in those communities. And we know we have got to have help from the federal government, from state government to help offset the costs to be able to build that out. And I hear what you're saying about the education challenges, the workforce development needs. I do think that if we can help increase broadband access in many of these rural and remote tribal communities, that then we can find some ways to provide that information to folks. I mean, Paul's class is a really good example where we've got people from all over rural Washington that are taking the class. They wouldn't necessarily in their hometown have access to the kind of training that they have access to through his course. And so if we can get this infrastructure to these communities, we don't necessarily have to have the expertise there. We can connect to where it is. It may be a neighboring village. It may be, it doesn't necessarily have to be a hub and spoke from a urban area. There are ways for our rural communities to share amongst themselves when they have the expertise. We've seen that happen a lot in the telehealth world where, a radiologist lives in one rural area and they do teleradiology to several different, rural areas. So it's not a silver bullet. It's not all there is to this. There's a lot of steps to help increase the needs and support those things in communities. But it's a piece of the puzzle, I think, that could help.
There are many different entities in Alaska that are working on this now. The Alaska Alaska Native Health Consortium, the Rotary at this point, the State of Alaska bit, the Denali Commission, Public Radio. One of the issues, I believe, is going to be coordination of all of this. So the mapping and the determination that is, I think, going to be kind of critical. I did mention before some people came on, I was sent by the immediate past president of the Southeast Rotary Club an article from a week ago about how the U.S. Department of Agriculture just granted $21.5 million to bring undersea fiber optic cable to Prince of Wales Island, which is one of the major islands with medium-sized Native communities on there. Monica, for what it's worth, Alaska is about as big as the U.S. east of the Mississippi River, and it has the smallest road system. So most of these places are accessible only by air or by water or both. And so it's going to need to be probably going to need to be a satellite-based broadband at this point. I mean, which of course will be less expensive as they put up more space junk over time. But it's also going to be something that will need to have long-term sustainability. On the other hand, things work both ways. in Soldotna, for example, our neurological radiologist at our local tertiary hospital does the neurological MRIs for the Seattle region as well. So, I mean, if you go in for a neurological MRI, you'll probably have it read from here in Soldotna.
I love hearing those stories.
Are there any other questions? Now, we are going to try to go and put together a final report, and I would ask all of our presenters if tonight if they would consider writing up a few paragraphs that we could include under your name as part of it. And Paul, I think tomorrow or within the next few days, you may expect to get a call from one of the local branches of University of Alaska Anchorage.
Sounds great.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you indeed.
This
Thank
was
you
really-
all.
Yeah,
Very
thank you so
interesting.
much.
Great panel.
Next time,
Thank
can
you
I
so
come to Alaska though? Dawn, can we
Sure.
work on that?
I was just
Yeah.
going to say, Monica, what you need is to come back to Alaska and get some more experience with the way the rural Alaska is set up, and then think about how you could bring the boom there.
Well,
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, I love, and I
absolutely.
was, my eyes are popping out still about 200 tribes. So, because I work with mostly rural and tribal communities. So, wow, yeah,
Oh,
there's work to be done for sure.
it's 16% of our state population.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yep.
We are here in Soldotna. We're 150 road miles out of Anchorage, and we are officially classified as rural. I'm going to go down to our Fred Meyer mega store and buy some sushi to take it home.
Yeah. Well, Monica, I'm thinking about how we can get our Alaska trip in there. It's
Okay.
Mhm.
the
Hey,
fabulous
Monica.
place. I'm fortunate I get to go there somewhat regularly. It's fabulous. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks all. Very much appreciated. Write up
Thank
something
you.
guys, that'll help us out. Thanks so much. We appreciate everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Rosie,
Take care, everyone.
we can turn off the recording. Now, once we're off here, oh,